facts tell, stories sell. See, the two reasons that people do not buy is because of either doubt or they don't understand what they're buying. We talked about that earlier. It's so important for you to understand the psychology behind this and how it actually affects human behavior when it comes to any type of resistance. The good news is this, is that you've been taught how to overcome both forms of resistance with facts when it comes to doubt and with examples and stories when someone doesn't understand it. Let us explore this a little bit deeper to further develop your sales skills. There's only two types of evidence. In the legal system, there's actually only two types of evidence or facts that can be presented: direct or indirect evidence. Both forms of evidence can be actually used in a trial to either convict or acquit an individual. Let's talk about direct evidence so you understand it. Direct evidence is eyewitness testimony. This type of evidence is typically a confession of what the individual saw with their own eyes that can be tested and corroborated. This type of evidence is one of the strongest forms of evidence available. The second type of evidence, indirect evidence, is what some will refer to as circumstantial evidence, which is everything outside of eyewitness testimony. These facts can be equally as powerful as direct evidence. Indirect evidence includes things like DNA evidence, fingerprints, statements, things that are observed that give the appearance of a crime. So how does all this understanding of direct and indirect evidence help a salesperson? See, to be a sales rock star, you must learn human behavior and how people think and react to things. See, when a jury is presented with direct or indirect evidence, it will convince them to do one of two things: to either convict or acquit that individual. See, in sales, we should take this same approach and see ourselves as the lawyer, and the prospect is now our jury. Use that discovery process to uncover the evidence. See, we have the responsibility to be an information gatherer and not an information giver, and gather all the facts and all the evidence before we actually present our case to the jury. See, if we have all the facts about the prospect's situation, it gives us the best chance to present them to the prospect as indisputable evidence. This allows the prospect to produce their own conclusion, and guess what? They end up convincing themselves. You want to create absolute certainty in the prospect's mind. See, a sales lounge act does not take the time to gather indisputable evidence before they actually present to the prospect. They still leave them in doubt about their decision and why they're not consistent in their sales process. That is why during your discovery process, you must take the time to ask deeper level questions to uncover the problem. This way it becomes fact to your prospect. See, you want at the end of your conversation to leave that prospect with absolute certainty. Remember, certainty is the absence of doubt. In order to help somebody understand something, you must paint the picture and sell the story. See, if you can paint that picture in your mind, you're able to sell it through a story. See, to be a sales rock star, you must develop the skills to become a very good storyteller. See, stories are about experiences that will help the prospect understand how this product or this service is actually going to end up solving their problem. See, when someone does not understand something, a story allows them to visualize it actually in their head. They can see that that product or service is going to make their life a little bit better. If you want to paint an effective picture in the prospect's mind, you must make the prospect see themselves as the main character. See, the most effective stories are the ones where the individual can actually see themselves as the main character in the story. You want that other person to become that main character in your story. If they become the main character, they can now experience all of those emotions that come with being the main character. That's why it's so important to replace that word I with the word you in your stories and examples. Great stories make the individual the main character and not the salesperson. Stories also help the sale become emotional. See, people buy on emotions. We've talked about that. So your stories must bring the emotions out in your prospect. You must share stories of your experience with a product or service that you're actually selling. If you have parents, friends, or family members that have purchased what you're selling, those are first-hand accounts that are very, very powerful. They can evoke some extremely powerful emotions in that other person when you tell them. In Medicare sales, it's so important that you bring up parents during your Medicare presentation. See, when selling Medicare-related products, if you have parents that are on Medicare, they should come up in every conversation that you have with that prospect. At the end of the day, you'll help a lot more people and make a lot more money than anyone else out there because a prospect is now going to be able to relate to you. People make their purchasing decisions based on emotions. There's nothing more emotional than talking about how your service or product solved your parents' health insurance problems. When you're telling a story over the phone, you want that story to be between 15 to 20 seconds. You don't want a drawn out long story because what will happen is it's going to start being about you and not about that other person. See, the story is there for the prospect to actually understand and relate to that problem. The story is meant to inspire the prospect to actually take action. The story is not there to bore them. A great story can get very, very boring if it's drawn out way too long. Once upon a time, you've heard it before. We can learn a lot about stories by examining how most fairy tales start. Once upon a time. It begins to transport the reader into a story so that they can start to visualize themselves actually in it. That is what you want your prospect to actually feel. Here's an example. Jim, I just helped a client with a similar situation as you, and here's what they did. What you've now done by telling Jim that you helped out a client with a similar situation is you now inserted that prospect as the main character so they can now begin to relate to your story. You're also inspiring that prospect, Jim, to now take action. Stories should end by creating an emotional response. See, all great stories should end with an emotional response from the buyer to take action on your proposal. See, people buy an emotion. We've talked about it several times, and stories can be one of the most effective tools that you can tap into. Your performance should be a story that actually ends with a prospect begging to buy what you're selling.